Good morning, Faith Baptist Church family. I hope I still have a voice after that worship set. That was really great. Thank you guys for blessing us. And I want to say that Faith Baptist Church is really near and dear to our hearts. We started from here. We attended a Wednesday night Bible study, and that really led us to where we are in Uganda today. And Pastor Craig has been very important to us. I don't think we would still be there in Uganda without him. He walked through some very difficult times with us and really has been my mentor. And so that's why he likes to give me a hard time. So now I have the microphone. And so now it's my turn. And so I wanted to tell you that Victoria Falls is not in Uganda. Victoria Falls is on the border of Zambia and Zimbabwe, about 2,000 miles away from Uganda. So if you see a photo of Victoria Falls on our social media, I don't know why, but so I got mine in. So, but in all seriousness, my name is Klint Ostermann, as he said, and with my wife and Olivia and Morgan, we live in Jinja, Uganda, in East Africa. Our oldest daughter, Peyton, are you here? Yeah, there you are. Our oldest daughter, Peyton, moved back about a year ago and is going to university in College Station. So, but yeah, we want to thank you guys for allowing us to speak today. I'm honored. It's a huge blessing because this church has been such a blessing to me, my family, and the people in Uganda. So I'm very humbled to be standing before you today. So we're going to be in the book of Isaiah, chapter 58 today. So if you want to turn your Bible there, that's where we'll be. In case you couldn't tell by my name, and maybe you don't know, but I'm from Windthorst, and I grew up a farmer. I grew up working on a farm, and I really didn't enjoy it. It was milking cows early in the morning and a lot of hard work that I said, you know what, let me run far away from this. Let me go get a business degree from Midwestern State, and then I can be away from farming. And I ended up a vice president at American National Bank, and God has a funny sense of humor because now I'm a farmer in Uganda teaching farmers. So it's really amazing. But also, from Windthorst, I grew up Catholic. And so I grew up Catholic, not because I had a relationship with Jesus, but because my parents were Catholic, and because their parents were Catholic, and their parents were Catholic. And as far as, probably from the first pope, our family was Catholic. I don't know. But I thought that made me a Christian. I even deceived my wife when we got married and told her, yeah, I'm a Christian. And because I honestly thought I was. I was checking all the boxes, right? I was baptized when I was a baby. I went to First Holy Communion. I did First Reconciliation. When I was a teenager, I got confirmed. So I was doing all the things that I thought I was a Christian, right? I was doing all the religious things. My parents told me that when they were younger, the services that they went to were done in Latin. I was like, Mom, do you speak Latin? I didn't know that. She said, no, we don't speak Latin. But they were just going to the service because that's what they were supposed to do. That's what they were obligated to do, actually. So before I got saved, I looked the part, but I didn't have a relationship with Jesus. Only religion. And that song, Break Down the Walls of All My Traditions, something about stopping all the religion, that really resonated with me, and I thought it tied in very well with what I'm sharing today. So thank you, Adam, for having that song. I wasn't Christian, but I thought I was. I wasn't living for others. I was only living for myself. I wasn't living in joy because I was frustrated because I didn't have a relationship with God, and He wasn't answering my prayers. And that's what we find in Isaiah chapter 58 is with the Israelites. So let's read that starting in verse 1. It says, cry aloud, do not hold back. Lift up your voice like a trumpet. Declare to my people their transgression, to the house of Jacob their sins. Yet they seek me daily and delight to know my ways, as if they were a nation that did righteousness, and did not forsake the judgment of their God. They ask of me righteous judgments. They delight to draw near to God. Why have we fasted and you see it not? Why have we humbled ourselves and you take no knowledge of it? Behold, in the day of your fast you seek your own pleasure and oppress all your workers. Behold, you fast only to quarrel and to fight and to hit with a wicked fist. Fasting like yours today will not make your voice to be heard on high. Is such the fast that I choose, a day for a person to humble himself? Is it to bow down his head like a reed and to spread sackcloth and ashes under him? Will you call this a fast and a day acceptable to the Lord? Is not this the fast that I choose, to loosen the bonds of wickedness, to undo the straps of the yoke, to let the oppressed go free, and to break every yoke? Is it not to share your bread with the hungry and bring the homeless poor into your house? When you see the naked, to cover him, and not to hide yourself from your own flesh. So we're going to look at three things today that I wanted to share from this passage. There are two don'ts and one do. We're going to spend a lot more time in the do. So first, let's look at the first don't. Don't be religious. So the Israelites were doing all the religious things. In verse 2 and 3, we see that they were fasting. That's a religious thing that Christians do, right? We're doing that now. We do that today. We fast. They were reading God's word. It says that they delighted to know his ways. And they were praying. It said they were crying out to God. They were checking all the boxes that a good Israelite should do. But they were frustrated because God wasn't answering them. In fact, they said, why have we fasted and you see it not? Just like I was doing the things to look like a good Catholic boy, the Israelites were doing all the things to look religious. But this wasn't what God was desiring. You see, God cares more about having an intimate relationship with him than looking like a good Christian or doing all the Christian things. Thank you. I went to church, but it was only because we were supposed to. We were obligated to. In fact, there were holy days of obligation. I was talking to Gary Morath after this first service and talked about if there's a wedding on a Saturday, it has to be after 4:30 so that it counts for your holy day of obligation so you don't have to go to church on Sunday. Well, I never want to have to go to church. I want to go to church now. And that's because I have a relationship with Jesus. I want to spend time worshiping the Lord of Lords and King of Kings. We often see examples of religious people trying to look religious in Uganda. Often they have these overnight prayer services. These things go all night long, and they bring speakers like that out. And if you can turn it to 100, I think they somehow get it to like 150. And it just rattles the windows, and all night long they're just screaming and screaming and screaming, wanting to look religious, wanting to see if that's how they can get God's attention. But they're only appearing to be religious. There's not the real desire. But we also see many Ugandans that will walk miles, even in the rain, to get to church because they want to worship with other believers and worship the Lord. So that's our first don't. Don't be religious. Next, we're going to look at don't be a hypocrite. The Israelites asked, why have we fasted and you see it not? God answers them in the second part of verse 3 up to 5. He said, behold, in the day of your fast, you seek your own pleasure and oppress all your workers. Behold, you fast only to quarrel and to fight and to hit with the wicked fist. Fasting like yours this day will not make your voice to be heard on high. Is such the fast that I choose, a day for a person to humble himself? Is it to bow down his head like a reed and to spread sackcloth and ashes under him? Will you call this a fast and a day acceptable to the Lord? They were fasting, but they were abusing their workers. And you might say, you know what, I don't have workers. But how do you treat the people, the bank teller? How do you treat the people at the convenience store? Are you a Karen asking for the manager? You know, I've heard waitresses often hate working on Sunday mornings after church because people come after church and they're not treated very well and they're not tipping very well. So even though we may not have workers, we can still oppress people that are doing things for us. They were also fasting, but they were arguing and fighting. You know, I think as far as, I've been on this earth 48 years, and I don't think I've ever seen so much division and strife and infighting and, people using social media platforms to spread, hostility and fighting with each other. And this is between churches. This is between Christians. No different from the rest of the world. So God said, you're still quarreling and fighting. That's not the fast I want. They were also fasting because they wanted to look good to others, right? They were trying to appear holy by bowing down and putting on sackcloth and spreading ashes to show others that they're suffering. But have we ever been guilty of coming to church and dressing up in a nice clothes so that other people see us? They see our car parked in the parking lot. Making sure that we carry the Bible that is very worn and used to church so it looks like we've been using it. This is a brand new Bible, and I was like, I should probably bring my other one because it looks a little more like I've been using it. I just bought this at Mardell's this week, so don't be a hypocrite. Now we're going to look at the B. And we're going to spend the do. We're going to spend more time in this part. Do be generous. So verses 6 and 7, we read, "Is not this the fast that I choose? To loose the bonds of wickedness, to undo the straps of the yoke, to let the oppressed go free, and to break every yoke? Is it not to share your bread with the hungry, and bring the homeless poor into your house? When you see the naked, to cover him, and not to hide yourself from your own flesh." So the true fast that God is desiring here in Isaiah 58 is a 4-part process. Loosen the bonds of wickedness, undo the straps of the yoke, letting the oppressed go free, and breaking every yoke. So you might be asking, what is a yoke? So you have a photo here. This is a yoke. It's a beam of wood that's put between two animals, sometimes an ox, a mule, a donkey, or a horse, and then that's tied to a plow or a cart. And it's so those animals can pull those together. So I want to do a demonstration of a yoke. So I'm going to ask Micaiah and Adam, can you come? Micaiah. I said Micaiah. All right. So I don't know if these guys they're either going to be oxen or mules. I don't know. What do you think, Craig? Donkey. Okay, we settled on donkeys. All right. So donkeys don't just stand here like this, right? Like donkeys are like this. Yeah. Yeah. So I'm going to be the yoke. So I'm going to come in between here, and I'm going to be the yoke that ties them, right? And there's a farmer behind us that is got ropes, and he directs these donkeys where he wants to go. Is this nice?
Yeah.
Oh, it's nice. Okay. So if the farmer wants to go there, but you don't get to go where you want, or right? You do what the farmer wants. There's no freedom. There's no. Thank you, guys. I had Pastor Craig be the oxen in the first service, so he said he volunteered his son the second service, so I can see why. So yokes are not nice because they restrict freedom of movement. They restrict freedom of choice. But what Isaiah is talking about in chapter 58, this yoke he's talking about is a yoke of poverty. In the same way we saw the yoke holding these oxen back and restricting their movement and their freedom, poverty has that same effect. God doesn't desire for us to remain in poverty. We see so much poverty in Uganda. In a bit, I'm going to share a video about a widow in her 80s named Tabitha. She was struggling to feed her family because much of the farmland that her family had farmed traditionally had been bought up by a tree plantation. A sawmill went in, and then they put a big tree plantation. And the land that they didn't take was very poor land that couldn't grow enough food to feed their family. She was living under the yoke of poverty. So I'm going to show, you'll see her in a little bit in a video. So how can we get rid of this yoke of poverty? How can we remove that yoke? So first thing we do is we loosen the bonds of wickedness. Poverty often is a consequence of sin that is in our life. God didn't create poverty. Rather, it's a consequence of disobedience and failed relationships of mankind. Poverty began with Adam and Eve when they sinned in the garden in the east of Eden. So the first step of removing the yoke of poverty is to help people understand their depravity and their sinfulness and their need for a Savior. That's how we loosen the bonds of wickedness. The second step is to undo the straps of the yoke. The poor need to come out from under the yoke of poverty. And verse 7 shows us practically how we can do this. It says, "Is it not to share your bread with the hungry and bring the homeless poor into your house? When you see the naked, to cover him, and not to hide yourself from your own flesh." So we can practically remove this yoke of poverty, undo the straps of the yoke of poverty, by feeding the hungry, giving shelter to the homeless, and clothing the naked. We can see this again in the New Testament, in Matthew chapter 25. I'll read that for you. Verse 35 to 40, it says, "For I was hungry, and you gave me food. I was thirsty, and you gave me drink. I was a stranger, and you welcomed me. I was naked, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you visited me. I was in prison, and you came to me." Then the righteous will answer him, saying, "Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you drink? And when did we see you a stranger and welcome you, or naked and clothe you? And when did we see you sick or in prison and visit you?" And the king will answer them, "Truly I say to you, as you did it to one of the least of my brothers, you did it to me." Poverty is prevalent in Uganda. We can't, as Amy's saying, we witness it, right? We can't practically address all the poverty. There are too many people who are hungry. There are too many people who don't have proper shelter. There are too many people that can't meet all of their family's needs. There are many large organizations that have tried. Many people have come in to try to address poverty with handouts and giving. And all that has resulted in is the poverty level is still the same, but it's created a cycle of dependency and entitlement. It hasn't impacted poverty at all. So what we do is we teach a better farming practice called farming God's way. And in a nutshell, farming God's way looks at how does God farm in nature. And so it uses things like minimal tillage, crop rotations, proper spacing of plants, doing things on time to high standards. And then it's tied in with 6 biblical principles. And so 85% of people in Uganda are involved in farming in one way or another. And the farming practices that they've used for centuries has resulted in depleted land, lower yields, and this has caused poverty. Most of the farmers in Uganda, not most, but many of the farmers in Uganda are subsistence farmers. This means that they don't have a job, they don't have a business, they are just growing what their family needs to eat. The problem is, if there's ever any issues where there's a famine or a drought or fall armyworm that comes and eats the crops or disease that comes through, there's no plan B, right? People starve because they're under this yoke of poverty. There's often not enough left to save or to give or to sell. We've heard stories of children dying with malaria because they couldn't afford the medicine that it takes to treat that malaria. Now, this medicine only costs between $5 and $6, and that doesn't sound like a lot to us, but when you only survive off what you're growing, you can't do that. And because of the yoke of poverty, there's no choice in what they can do, and there's no way to handle crisis when things like malaria hit. Farming God's way however, results in 7 to 10 times as much yield from the crops over traditional farming. This now means that subsistence farmers can have excess to sell, they have excess to give, and excess to save. They're able to pay for schooling for their kids. Most schooling in Uganda is private, and so if you don't pay, you don't go to school. They can improve their housing situation, buy medicine for their kids when it's needed, buy clothes for their family. Farming God's way is feeding the hungry, it's sheltering the homeless, and it's clothing the naked in a very practical way. So I'm going to show you a 3-minute video that has testimonies from 2 different people. The first one is Tabitha, the widow I talked about already, that didn't have enough food to feed her family. And she talks about how Farming God's way has helped her to grow closer to God. It's helped her to have enough food for her family and to even have vegetables to have more nutritious crops. Much of the diet there is a very starch-based diet with rice or ground up corn. But growing vegetables helps with the diet and helps with health. So she was very excited that she had the ability to have vegetables now. So she's speaking in the local language. So I have that so you can hear what the local language is. And you're going to see what our farm looks like. But it's being translated by Alex. And Alex is another farmer that was living in poverty and had his life completely renewed because of Farming God's way. And the last testimony is from Edward. Edward is the local chairperson where Tabitha lives. So a local chairperson serves as the mayor, it serves as the sheriff, it serves as the justice of the peace, the judge, handles all the issues in that village. And many of the local chair people that we interact with and work with, they're always looking out for what can they get out of this relationship. And so often they're looking for getting paid, getting bribes to do things. But Edward is different. Edward has a heart for his village and wants to see his village come out from under the yoke of poverty. And Edward actually gave us 2 acres of his own land to be able to use to put in gardens, to be able to train farmers on his very land. So he's been a real blessing. So it may be a bit hard to understand Alex. He speaks with a pretty thick accent. But we're having a meet and greet tonight, this evening at 5. And I'm going to share more stories about Alex, about Tabitha, and about Edward. So you'll be able to hear some things from me about those people. But I wanted to just show you this video.
Can you give me an example of how Farming God's Way has improved a farmer's ability to grow food for their families?
Mpegano nesokera nze mwene nesokera kunze banange bituyambye enenani enimeyo wa Katonda etuyambye kuba yatusesa kulala ni Katonda twali tuyidi ntusoka wasaba nuwalima yatuwama era twabako keri kumusingida enani yesatuditi okwe twende enimeyo yaifwe ate twatamu ebiseera ni Katonda yetusooka twamusaba me twasimba era ettaka lyaffe twawika irungi lituwali kinene titukadaagayibwa mbu tudaagayibwa bbe.
So she's the first example. Farming God's Way has helped her so much and it has brought them closer to God. So it has helped their soil to become fertile and they have food, vegetables, they don't buy.
How has Farming God's Way impacted your community?
Yeah, there is a very big impact in a way that when people came to learn about this Farming God's Way, they got the knowledge and applied it in their homes, and they are really giving out testimonies. There is a very big difference since they began practicing this Farming God's Way. They have enough vegetables. So now we used not to have vegetables at home, but they have vegetables at home for their consumption, own consumption, and even they have surplus for selling. So people are coming to buy, and also they also having enough they are no longer spending money to go and buy these vegetables. So it has really impacted a lot. They have food, they have vegetables, so now they are now healthy, and they really appreciate. They really just thank God because He has given us the friends who have come up with this idea of farming God.
So that's how we're practically undoing the straps of the yoke in Uganda that ties people to poverty. The next step is to let the oppressed go free. So people need to come to a saving relationship with Jesus Christ and repent. This is true freedom. Not the being strapped to the yoke and tied, but true freedom. Matthew 11:28-30 talks about a different kind of yoke. It says, "Come to me, all who labor and are heavy laden. I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and lowly in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." So this is a completely different yoke than the yoke of poverty that we're seeing. So how can people learn about this yoke? They need people to teach them. In Matthew chapter 10, verse 14 and 15, it says, "How then will they call on him who have they not believed? And how will they believe in him in whom they've not heard? And how are they to hear without someone preaching? And how are they to preach unless they are sent? As it is written, how beautiful are the feet of those who preach the good news." So in Uganda, we're practically letting the oppressed go free by preaching the good news through farming God's way. So this tool allows us to build a relationship with farmers. So when we do a training, we spend the next 3 to 5 years building a relationship with these farmers. So every season, multiple times, we're checking on their farms, we're helping them to improve their farms, we're finding ways we can pray for them, we're finding ways we can serve them, and just building that relationship. And this has really been great because it's taken a lot of time. This is a long game, right? It's not just overnight evangelism program where people come. And when we first came, we did see a lot of salvations, but we realized it was really not true. It was people saying they wanted to be a Christian and giving their life to Christ because they thought that's what they needed to do to please us. And that's what they needed to do to get whatever we had that they wanted. But this idea of building a relationship and spending time getting to know them and then sharing the gospel has been very fruitful. And this year has been more fruitful than any other year that we've been doing Farming God's Way. So far this year on our farm, we've had 14 people give their life to Christ. And one of them is the wife of a Muslim worker we have on our farm. And so we're so excited. And Alex, the guy that was translating for Tabitha, he's responsible for discipling them and mentoring them and helping them in their walk with Christ because he's done it. So we want to tell you that you guys are the reason. A lot of the people in this sanctuary are the reason that people like our farm worker's wife have been able to hear the gospel and accept Jesus Christ. So thank you for coming alongside us and partnering with us. The last step in this process is to break every yoke. So after we've removed the yoke of poverty, what we want to do is we want to break that yoke. We want to break that yoke so we can never go back. The idea is that once this yoke of poverty is removed, and then it's broken so we can't put it back on. Once we're born again, we're new creations. There's no turning back to the old ways. So what's the practical application for us today? So first, I want to say, don't be religious. Instead, foster a greater relationship with Christ. Number 2, don't be a hypocrite, but care for the marginalized and oppressed. Be generous by meeting the needs of the hungry and homelessness. Whether that's in your neighborhood, whether that's with Church Without Walls, whether that's here in Wichita Falls, I'm seeing the cans of food here, or by partnering with our work in Uganda. We need people to partner with us by supporting us on a monthly basis. We can't do this work without you. It takes people willing to partner with us in ministry in Uganda because it takes money to carry out removing the yoke of poverty and carrying out the true fast. We haven't done a fundraiser since 2014 for our monthly support. God has really sustained us, but we are in need of an additional $2,500 a month. And each one of you can make a difference. When we first started fundraising, I had an opportunity. We had a lot of money to raise because we had to buy a whole house full of stuff, car, everything, plane tickets, all of that stuff to get to Uganda. We had a big number to raise. And I didn't enjoy that process, going and talking to people and asking for money. I kind of felt like a beggar, but now I understand that it's not really that. It's more of building partnerships for the work we're doing there. But at the time, in 2014, I didn't know that. And so I had an opportunity to share our ministry with a very wealthy man. And I drove to this guy's house, and it was just this huge, huge house, amazing place. And he was very interested in what we were doing in Uganda. And he asked a lot of questions, and he said, you know what, I'm going to send you a check. And I was pretty excited. I was like, wow, this might get us over the hump. This might be what we need to, finish our fundraising so we can get to Uganda. And I remember my wife Vicky called me from work, and she said, hey, I went to the post office, and there's an envelope from that guy. Because we'd been anticipating, I wonder how much this is going to be. What's he going to give? Is he going to give $100,000? Is he going to give us $1 million? What is this going to be? I don't know. And so I was like, wait till I get home. Don't open it. I want to open this together. So we open the check together, open the envelope, we look at the check. It was a check for $20. It wasn't that we're ungrateful for that money. It's just we learned a very important lesson that day. We learned that there's a big difference between being wealthy and being generous. We have school teachers that partner with us at $300 a month. They're very generous, and they're very important partners in the work that we're doing in Uganda. William Carey, a missionary to India, once said, I will go down into the pit if you'll hold the ropes. Would you be willing to be generous and hold the ropes for us? I was talking with Pastor Craig. I was complaining a little bit about, we've been here since the 1st of June in the U.S., and it's like, man, food is so expensive. We can go to take my family to McDonald's, and it's like $50, $60. I'm like, this is ridiculous. But I realized, skipping a few fast food meals a month can really add up to $100 or more. And a sacrifice like that can mean that more people can come out from under the yoke of poverty and hear the gospel and be discipled and not have to miss meals because they're able to grow what they need for their families. In addition to monthly support, we also have a needs list in case sponsoring one of those items is how you would prefer to partner with us. And one of our biggest needs is a new ministry vehicle. For the last 7 years, Vicky's been driving a 30-year-old vehicle. It's a 1993 Toyota Prado. And I graduated high school in 1993, so I know that's old. I'm old. I know how I'm falling apart. And Pastor Craig told me he drove a 30-year-old vehicle here, and he had to get rid of it because it was too expensive to maintain, and he kind of had to baby it. And you can talk to him after the service about how those roads in Uganda are. They're quite challenging. And this vehicle is really not safe for us to drive. Often the brakes don't work. Often the wheel is wobbling when you get to 60 kilometers an hour. And in addition to the safety issues, it's costing us a lot of money. So we've spent $2,500 a year in repairs. And just this very week, we've had to spend $350 to fix an oil leak issue that has been plaguing us. About every 3 days, we have to add another quart of oil in, and we just send it to the mechanic to work on while we're here. So many of the areas that we work in are remote locations that are very far away and on challenging roads. And vehicles in Uganda are not cheap. There's a 100% import tax on all vehicles coming in. So we're looking for a new vehicle for us. And when I say new for us, that's a 10-year-old vehicle. That's what we're able to get imported in there. So something that's 10 years old is what we're able to get. A 10-year-old four-wheel drive vehicle costs about $30,000. And this will allow us to reach more of Uganda with the message of farming God's way in a safe and economical manner. So we're going to be sitting in the back, Vicky, Peyton, and I. We have some prayer cards with on the back. It's information on how you can support us. There's a place you can sign up for a newsletter, and we'd love to plan a time to talk to you about how you can join our partnership team today. So please meet with us after the service. Isaiah chapter 58 is a powerful chapter in the Bible that speaks to the importance of true fast. It teaches us that fasting is not just about abstaining from food, but about living a life of compassion, of generosity, and justice toward others. In this chapter, God calls us to reject religious practices that are devoid of meaning and instead focus on what truly matters, loving and serving our neighbors. So is there a response you need to make today? Have you been looking the part, but not loving your neighbors, not serving your neighbors? Have you been selfish with your time and money? Do you need a relationship with Jesus so that you can come out of the yoke of poverty? There'll be people on either side of the church after the service or during the response time that can meet and talk with you if you need to make a commitment. Thank you.